There goes my yellow shirt, my clean yellow shirt. You come, Mama? Yeah. Oh, it's a good girl. Get sore. Oh, get sore. All right. So hi and welcome. I'm Caroline Best of the Tao of Horsemanship. Today's video is about PTSD and horses, how to assess and how to overcome. This is a really complicated topic. And if the camera just wants to show, we have Joey, and then we have the baby, Blue. And then to your left, we have Lovey and Zor grooming each other. And I brought these guys out for this video because all four of them have suffered PTSD, and some still have triggers. Right now, all four of these horses have triggers still, all four of them. A lot of it, the reason they still have triggers, a lot of it is because I have not spent every day helping them, and I'll talk about that. And none of these horses here have gone through a full foundation training program with me. So what I mean by that is my Trinity, Legend, Smokey, and Sundance, when I got back into horses many years ago, those were the three horses that I acquired along, and I had my donkey. And Smokey has passed. For those of you that know, Smokey has passed this year. And especially Smokey, I've never met any horse with as much post-traumatic stress disorder. Even when Smokey was rehabilitated to a point where he was my constant go-to horse. He traveled all over the country with me. He attended clinics. He worked with me every day because he showed up. He wanted to. He'd be right there at the fence begging, just like these guys, begging to come out and be a part of the camera. Smokey's in the majority of my videos, whether my YouTube videos or my online courses. Just be careful next to you. So Sabrina has the whip. Thank you, Janine. We have help. Only just to teach these guys, they know that the whip just means, hey, enough is enough, back up. So where I'm headed with all of this is the reason why Smokey's rehabilitation was so successful is because, and Sundance and Legend, is because I spent every day with them. Every day. I'm not saying that we had intense direct training every day. That wouldn't be healthy mentally or physically for horses, especially when they're young and they're developing. But every day we had to handle behavioral issues. We had to handle triggers, whether they were afraid of a bag, a noise, the whip, anything. We had to handle it on a daily basis. And that's key to rehabilitation. In order to change unwanted behavior, just be careful, unwanted behavior in your horses, and that's the same as saying we want to rehabilitate trauma, because trauma produces unwanted behavior. It produces reactions in our horses that are dangerous and unpredictable. So anytime you have unwanted behavior, and Sabrina, why don't you come on over here, love? I love this. Or triggers, post-traumatic stress disorder, you've got to repattern your horse. It's called cognitive recognition or repatterning. And that's what a lot of people don't teach you. And that's why when you send your horse that's scared of something or traumatized or has severe PTSD away to another trainer, that trainer doesn't necessarily have the expertise to understand all of the deep layers that are associated with PTSD or trauma. I've written 2 published articles, one recently and one back in 2014, about PTSD in horses. And I'm going to read parts of these articles, and then I'm also going to talk to you about rehabilitating. But it's really important that I give you the background, what PTSD means, what it means to horses, and how it shows up. And unfortunately, as I say so often in my videos, unfortunately, 99% of our domesticated horses have different levels of PTSD, different levels of trauma. And I say it like that because it depends on how young the horse was when it experienced a negative experience that has now become a trigger. And a trigger is when you have a past memory. So every time something reminds you of that negative experience, that becomes a trigger. And that means that you're no longer present and you go in past memory. Horses do the same thing. It's proven research. I have that in my articles. It's proven research. And I will explain the #1 science-based reason why it's proven. And it has to do with the brain chemistry, why horses suffer acutely to trauma. So when you just think about our domesticated horses and how many of them are damaged on some level. Again, it depends on age and how young or old that horse is and how often it experienced that negative experience, or how many years it sat with that negative experience. Those are two really key defining areas. And a lot of people, you're just not educated enough, and even the horse trainers out there are not educated enough to understand the depth of this. And so often people have sent, I've worked with thousands of horses, and every horse I've worked with has suffered some level of trauma. Even young horses that have come to me have suffered, unfortunately, including the one that I now have before he came to me. Unbeknownst to his owner, she certainly didn't mean to mess him up, but she did. And so poor handling, confusion, overexposure, meaning the horse is overfaced or overwhelmed by stimuli or constant pressure, and it creates trauma, it creates a trigger. And then all of a sudden, every time you raise your hand, the horse is afraid. And it doesn't necessarily mean the horse was hit in the face. It just means that that use or that physical action and use of pressure, use of energy, created a trigger, created a past memory, because that reminded that horse that every time this happened, X, Y, and Z happened. So let's talk a little bit about what it means to have PTSD. People use this as a buzzword now, and they, again, often misinterpret it and overuse it. I've met horses, it doesn't matter what age, that have just had a little bit of exposure to negative handling or training, and that made them very unsure and confused and unconfident. But when I can assess that it's just that, which is easy for me to assess at my level, then I know, man, within 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, they're gonna come clean. This will be forgotten. We will have reset new patterns and behaviors and recognition and experiences and associations that are all positive, that will replace the old, and the horse will be good as new. So there's a difference. And then when you get severe trauma that becomes a PTSD, that's when you have extreme behaviors, extreme reactions to situations. So the word extreme is what I want to make really clear here. Horses with extreme behaviors and reactions are horses that have undergone excessive trauma. And again, that can show up in many forms: trauma, abuse, mishandling. It can be purposeful, it cannot be purposeful, it can just be ignorance. I love you too, baby. So we have to think of the key word excessive. And then if we are working with the horse and we know what we're doing, and we're working with the horse for 30 days or more, retraining, rehabilitating, and we're not seeing significant changes, then we have to re-diagnose, reassess the situation. And a lot of this also comes down to education. Even our horse trainers who say, oh yeah, I can fix that bad behavior, they don't understand that there's a deeper cause. They don't understand that that bad behavior, again, it's a misinterpretation, it's a misunderstanding, it's a lack of education. And they think that they can just, oh, the horse is scared of the tarp, scared of the bag, well then I'm just going to go ahead and sack it out and flood it and work it to death with that scary object until the horse is no longer scared of it. What happens is the horse goes into deep self-preservation mode because the horse is already fight and flight, right? They've already reacted, which means they've shown great extreme action, which is either in fight or flight to get away from that scary object. So what happens is these type of trainers wear the horse down until the horse chooses the last self-preservation mode and gives up. And that last self-preservation mode is the freeze mode. They just shut down completely, you guys. And then at that point, they hand the horse back to you and tell you the horse is fixed. See, he's not afraid of this thing anymore. You're not afraid of it anymore. And the horse is just like this. Nobody's home. Nobody is home. That is very prevalent, unfortunately, in about 75% of our horse training. It doesn't matter what discipline you're in. I've seen it in natural horsemanship, especially get abused in natural horsemanship because people hide behind the word natural and they use it as a bait and switch to get you, oh, this is a really well-known natural horsemanship trainer. They should be able to fix my horse. They're going to be so kind and natural and gentle. But it happens in every discipline. I just want you to be really careful and really aware that in my experience working with thousands of horses and students and being a student myself all the time, my eyes are always open. I'm studying, I'm traveling, I'm listening, I'm watching, I'm observing. At least 75% of our very well-acclaimed professional trainers and clinicians use this incorrectly. Use the term as far as your horse either having PTSD or your horse just having a negative behavior that they can fix. And they use the terms incorrectly and they handle the horses incorrectly. You've got to get to the cause. One of the secrets to my success as a specialist in rehabilitation and understanding, one of the secrets, the number one secret, and I'll tell you everything, you've just got to learn how to do it, which is not easy. It takes years of experience and practice, skill. It takes years. One of the secrets to the success of rehabilitation is not only getting to the cause, but helping your horse work through the trigger. Work through the trigger. And it's not that easy because you have to have about 10 different areas of expertise and skill because all these other areas have to help you help that horse work through that trigger. So it's not a mechanical process is what I'm trying to tell you like all these other trainers do. It's not a mechanical process where you're constantly flooding the horse with that stimuli and scary object till the horse goes through their fight and flight and chooses freeze and shuts down. It's not about mechanics at all. It's a very visceral and somatic and emotional experience for the horse. And there's 10 key factors that have to go into this process. And those key areas, you're working with them the whole time. It's not just working with one. You've got to be able to fluctuate between all of these key areas and help that horse. So what happens in this process is about the brain chemistry and the neurochemistry and the nervous system within the horse. And that's another second key secret that nobody else talks about when they're rehabilitating horses. They don't understand the way the brain works, and they don't understand the way chemistry and the release of your hormones work when you're in self-preservation mode. So when you, the human or the horse, and I'll explain why we're so similar. There's science to this. When either you or the horse is in self-preservation mode, which is fight, flight, or freeze, shut down, you produce adrenaline. Number one, you produce adrenaline. Adrenaline and cortisol are the same. When you are feeling relaxed and safe and comfortable, you release the chemical endorphin. Endorphin and dopamine are the same. Those are the feel-good hormones. And so what happens when people are constantly, like I said, re-triggering the horse, and Lovey is very afraid of the noise of paper and white bags due to whatever training she had as a young thoroughbred being prepared to race. Joey's an off-the-track thoroughbred also, who's not afraid of the things that she's afraid of. His experiences are very different, and his personality is very different. Oh, I love you guys. I love all of this. So long story short, the second key secret to successfully rehabilitating horses has to do with understanding the brain chemistry and understanding how to repattern the brain chemistry. And this again goes back to the first secret to rehabilitation, which is working your horse through it. And I love you too, buddy. Oh, I love it. They are just such lovers. Janine's behind the camera loving on the baby. Lovey keeps wanting to love on Sabrina. I love this. This is what it's all about, you guys. So PTSD, let me go ahead and read from some of my articles, because that way I can be really clear about stuff. Let's read the article from 2014. This is with the Holistic Horse magazine. Traumatized horses, can they be emotionally and mentally healed? So this is a long time ago. I've worked with thousands of horses. But in this article, I write, over the years, I've worked with hundreds of traumatized horses, most of whom have suffered so much emotional and mental trauma. They are left with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. PTSD is a hormonal reaction to a traumatic event that lasts longer than 30 days. The amount of stress endured during the traumatic event affects the release of certain hormones that are responsible for creating fight or flight response to stress. Both medical studies and research show that an area deep within the brain becomes damaged during traumatic events. And this is for humans and horses. And because our brain, it's the hippocampus area within the brain of the horse and the human is so identical, this research and the studies have proven that horses and humans, when they are under stress or when they are relaxed, they release the same amount of hormones, both horses and people. So you can see the huge similarity between us. And I equate this, and this is my own personal exploration and experience and belief. Nowhere else is this documented, except right now. Okay, I don't want you biting me, young baby. Thank you. You going over there. I'm not to play with. So what I'm about to tell you is doing this level of research, good girl, Lovey, put him in his place, over the years, and understanding the science, the proof that their hippocampus area and the release of the hormone with horses is equal to humans, proves to me emotionally that horses feel so much of what we feel on an emotional level. Until humans understand this and accept this as truth, we will never have the level of awareness needed to properly and correctly rehabilitate our horses. Key here, we'll never have the awareness or the capability to properly rehabilitate them. This is really huge. If we don't understand and revere them for being as socially and emotionally sentient and intelligent, then we're never going to truly understand the depth of their feelings and how sensitive they are as a species like us, and how so much of what we do in our world adversely affects them, constantly affects them, negatively affects them. Where's our sensitivity level with them? When that changes and works, is correct and good for the horse, then we're going to see significant changes just through the shift in our consciousness. Just through the shift in our consciousness. Those of you that study with me, that belong to like my Mastery membership program, my big program, we talk about this every week on our live webinars. My students experience what I'm talking about, and they understand that their horses have issues and challenges that they inherited when they bought the horse or rescued the horse. They understand that, and now they're learning even more of the depth of how their horses, the depth of what their horses feel, and how tuned in and attuned their horses are, and how every little thing we do affects them and influences them. So the hippocampus, a horseshoe-shaped structure, is part of the limbic center and is involved in several bodily functions, including storing and retrieval of new memories and emotional responses. And this is found within the horse and human. During a traumatic event, both adrenaline and cortisol are released into the body to prepare us for fight or flight or freeze. They are necessary for our survival. However, if these hormones remain in high concentration over an extended period, they become toxic to the hippocampus. Looks crazy. You might want to back up. Looks crazy, huh, people, that I'm letting my horse do this. I love it. I'm part of them. Oh my gosh. I was in the stall. I know I keep getting interrupted, with the 3 thoroughbreds the other day, just this week, and Monday. Today is Tuesday. Oh, I don't know. Maybe it was this weekend. And they all had hay, and they were sharing in this little 12 by 12. It's treated like a little run-in. And I was grooming them and loving on them and in between them and all smushed up and squished. But I trust them. They're very careful with me, because when you're part of their family, they treat you like a baby, a foal. Very, very careful. And just went to push Lovey away from the hay, just like down here, just pushed her, and Lovey overreacted, and I was behind her. Overreacted, slammed me into the wall, and I was in shorts, just stepped lightly. As soon as she felt that she had slammed me, she went forward, but then she stepped on my foot, and then she lifted her foot, and then she was like, "Oh my God, did I hurt you?" Trying to turn around and look at me. And yeah, it hurt, but I was just like, look, you guys, you gotta be careful with me. I'm like a toothpick next to you. And they are. It's just beautiful to get to this place. It's just so beautiful. And this is how you want to ride your horse too. You want your horse to take care of you and revere you. And they will, and they do. All right, so enough jumping around here. Let's get back to, so during a traumatic event, both adrenaline and cortisol are released into the body to prepare us for fight or flight or freeze. They are necessary for our survival. However, if these hormones remain in high concentration over an extended period, they become toxic to the hippocampus area within our brain, damaging and destroying cells. And this is proven in MRI brain scans for both horses and people. Researchers have found that people with chronic PTSD have smaller, reduced hippocampus areas. They've shrunk. And the hippocampus, the hormones are all tied into our nervous system, the horse's nervous system, the neurochemistry, the ability for us to process stimuli, our sensory awareness, sensory processing. It gets destroyed. So research shows when horses have endured a very traumatic experience and are exposed to chronic stress, their normal feedback system, their normal feedback system, which is a healthy release of adrenaline chemicals, breaks down, just as ours does, leading them to experience PTSD. Horses suffering from acute PTSD have endured so much stress and constant adrenaline, they remain in a chemically induced state of self-preservation. So a great example is an overreactive, spooky horse. And what really angers me, irritates me, pisses me off, period, is how often in our horse world, both traditionally minded horse people, as well as the natural horsemanship world, label horses. Oh, my horse is just really spooky and overreactive. Or my horse is really lazy and dull. And those are both two extremes on the spectrum, aren't they? And most often, that is not at all who your horse is. But your horse has suffered so much trauma that is who it's become. That is its self-preservation mode now. Overreactive, high alert, or completely shut down, checked out, which shows up in the horse acting dull and lazy. So let me tell you a little fact about horses. Enough. Thank you. A little fact about horses. So I've studied wild horses and I've worked with wild horses, and they're nothing like our domesticated horses. I cannot say enough about this in my videos. Nothing. So all this normal equine psychology bullshit that everybody's giving you out there by all these really well-known, acclaimed, professional horse trainers, authors, writers, instructors. They're just covering the basics of equine psychology. 99% of them only talk about equine behavior and never talk about the nature of horses. And so what they're teaching all of you is that your overly reactive, spooky horse or your overly dull, lazy horse is normal. Or they not only want you to accept it, if they want to change it, they just talk about we're going to change the behavior. But they don't understand the nature. Because the nature is it's not just the experience that creates that unwanted behavior in your horse, it's also the nature of the horse. The true personality, traits, and character. So an example would be if you have a very sensitive horse, more sensitive than another horse. Your training approach is going to have to be different for that more highly sensitive horse compared to just like a person. It's like having two people in the same room. Janine and I could be in the same conversation with somebody, a third person, and that third person could be talking to both of us, and we're both going to interpret it differently. Maybe it'll mean the same to both of us, but we're going to feel about it differently because we're two different people. I might be more sensitive to it and be offended, and Janine might be like water on a duck's back. No big deal. So if you're trying to teach me, the more sensitive, emotional person or horse, you can't teach me the same way you teach Janine, who's just more easygoing and things just don't bother her as much. Horses are more complicated than people are giving them credit. Everyone's trying to box everything and make it easy for people. They're all trying to sell you an easy way of dealing with, handling, and training. The only easy way is following a consistent curriculum so that all your horses learn the same things. That's the only easy thing there is. Other than that, they're very complicated because they're all so unique in their own traits, their own nature. And your nature is a precursor. It's a prelude to what you're going to be attracted to. If you have an example, a more curious young horse, they're going to get themselves into trouble. It's a precursor. I have one. He's constantly beating himself up, costing me money, scratching, getting into trouble. So we have to think about it like children. It really is like raising kids. Far more complicated than raising a puppy or a cat or any other domesticated species. So until we change our mindset about this and really embrace the fact that there's nothing easy about training or understanding your horses, there's nothing easy about it. That's why so many people give up and look for easy shortcuts to horse training. Or they manhandle the horses, force them, fight with them until the horse gives up or submits. Hi, sweet girl. Well, I'm so proud of you because you hate white paper. You hate the noise of it, and you hate white bags too. So without getting into any more, I don't really need to read any more of that particular article, Traumatized Horses from 2014, because I think I've covered enough, given you enough background or education on PTSD, what it means to have it, how it happens chemically, hormonally, and affects us, our brain chemistry, our nervous system, especially in the horse, our nervous system. I know so many of you want to know, how do we fix it? I gave you 2 secrets, 2 awarenesses to rehabilitation. And one, you have to start with the understanding that you've got to work your horse through it. It's not about desensitizing. Desensitizing is part of the process, but it should be a very low-key process. Meaning if my horse is afraid of this noise all the time, then I'll just have this noise around. I'll just put it in my horse's environment here. Meaning I'm not going to directly work with this to oversaturate or flood it. There might be an extreme case. If you look at my YouTube videos, you'll see that extreme case. So desensitizing is a more natural process of helping the horse get used to something that they're afraid of. But when you have severe cases of trauma, extreme, what's a severe? Extreme reactions to situations. All these horses have had extreme reactions. There's trauma and PTSD. So while I don't have to know what created it because I inherited all these guys, they're all rescues, I don't have to know what created that. You'll never know. You just know that your horse is afraid of this, but you don't know why. And you don't know for how long they were afraid or taught to be afraid of the whip, of anything. All these guys were afraid of the whip. Getting to the cause is a second secret. And the cause, like I just said, isn't identifying the scary thing per se. The cause is the emotional response, how it triggers your horse emotionally. This is why I brought up there's at least 10 areas that must be involved during the process, at least 10 of rehabilitation. And an example of those 10 areas would be you've got to develop trust, you've got to build confidence, you've got to work on your horse's courage, you've got to work on the relationship. There's all these areas that you must be working on when you are helping your horse work through. Now, while Smokey never fully recovered, his level of reaction was almost nothing. He got to a point that he could, as the word that I always use, is he could regulate himself. Smokey would have a trigger and I could watch it happen. I could watch him look like I am, like, oh my God, he would freeze, but he would start blinking, and then he would take a deep breath, and then he would lower his head, and then he would start licking and chewing, and then he'd keep blinking, and I could tell he was working right through regulating himself, which means he started to release the endorphin, the feel-good hormone, to replace the adrenaline. So in severe cases, you've got to work long enough until you see the horse understanding what's going on and resetting themselves. Re-regulating or resetting themselves. Nobody talks about it like that. And it can happen. They're really intelligent. And emotionally, they're far more refined and intelligent in a somatic, visceral sense. I mean, their sensory awareness and processing is just phenomenal as a species. Far more refined than ours. So their ability to heal and repattern with help is amazing. Absolutely. If you are interested or looking for more information, I don't know if I can put these articles up on YouTube, but you can always go to my website and find them on mydowofhorsemanship.com under resources, related articles. You can find these articles. And I offer courses and classes. We're going to be launching one of our largest courses, our problem solving course, sometime later. Hopefully in a couple of months from when this video is released. And it will give you hundreds of videos on problem solving, but using my method, my way of working with horses. So it's not going to be a step-by-step process. That would be the Mastery Membership Program. That would be where you would learn how to develop all the areas to developing your horse and rehabilitating them. It's an amazing process. Hi, sweet girl. I'm not here to rub you all over and get all your itchies. Or maybe I am. Go there. I get sidetracked. One of the things when I was talking about wild horses and domesticated horses, when you study wild horses, and that means I spent months observing them quietly, either on one of my horses or by myself. When you study how wild horses act all the time and interact, it'll blow your mind. They are so quiet, peaceful, harmonious, thoughtful, family, and their family dynamic is very important to them. And basically all the mares within that band, that herd of mares that the stallion protects, they're all family members, and they all work together as an organized community raising the young. And raising the young has a lot to do with social order and discipline. So it's not just about love either. That's what makes horses so amazing, is their ability, thank you, Lovey, for that hug, their ability to govern and to know and to discipline. Like when the baby's doing something that they don't like, a behavior, they correct it, and they correct it beautifully. So we have a lot to learn from them. But the most beautiful thing was when I rode my little Arab Legend up to a wild band of Chincoteague ponies, and they've been breeding them with quarter horses over the years, many years, so there's not a lot of inbreeding. They try to clean out the herds with the swims every summer in July. They do a really good job, and I worked with a lot of those ponies. And when Legend and I were riding on the beach and we came up to a stallion, and we were riding by some dunes, and we actually saw a young whale skeleton and behind one of the dunes. It was really wild to see that. I guess a big storm, nor'eastern, beached the youngster. He was still pretty big skeleton. So we were coming around a dune, and we came like 30 feet up to this, like 10 mares and a stallion. And I'm like, whoa. So Legend was like this. I just stopped. And the first thing I knew to do instinctively was directly turn and not face them. I don't want to cause a fight. I don't want to come into a situation looking aggressive at all. And so we just stood there sideways, and the stallion lifted his head. The mares didn't really pay attention to us. The babies were right by their sides. The stallion just lifted his head. He was on the outside of the band, the circle. Lifted his head, and I was like this. Legend was like this, and I was just so excited to be so close, and I really wanted to see what was going to happen, but I was also really scared, because if he took off after us, I mean, my Arab was fast, but holy cow. But he didn't. He just lifted his head and very quietly, with his head low, walked over and placed himself between us and his band of mares, and he went back to grazing. He made his presence known. We were extremely respectful. We didn't move. I never saw any sign that we had to move. And when he went back to grazing between me and the herd, we walked off. But all of my observations, it's just it's a harmony. I mean, you've got, these horses aren't as feral, obviously, as the wild Mustangs, because people camp and park, and you've got tourists that vacation on Chincoteague Island all the time, in Assateague Island. And so these horses were used to cars. They were used to a lot of human interaction, even from a distance, and they often were fed by hand. And they would be on the beach. You'd see stallions fighting on the beach. I mean, they were used to being around people, but they were still feral. And the point I want to make is, maybe over time they had become desensitized to all of that activity and stimuli, whereas the wild Mustangs are really out there in the wild. Their interaction is with a helicopter chasing them. So perhaps it has a lot to do with why they were so comfortable and quiet. But the biggest point I want to make, and especially when you get your horses back to a really healthy, solid foundation emotionally, is they're not reactive by nature. And that's a fact, because in the wild, the first thing when a horse perceives danger or is alerted, the first thing they do is they freeze. They get really still and quiet, and they heighten all their senses so they can smell, see, and hear what's around them. Then they go into fight or flight. And if they go into fight or flight, it's only for survival. You don't see wild horses screaming for each other, running around, being stressed out, being hypervigilant, being spooked about everything. You don't. I mean, Legend and I walked around that corner. They knew we were there. Yes, Legend was a horse, but I was a human on a horse. And they are used to people riding around them because of the pony runs every year. Not the police, but I forget the wildlife, the natural resource guys that will often ride to check on the horses. But anyway, keep that in perspective. They're all laying down and rolling. Oh, Lovey, does that feel good? I'm glad I'm not scratching you anymore. So keep that in perspective, getting your horses back to the state of relaxation and thinking and not reacting to everything. And I have, like I said before, I've got courses on this that can help you rehabilitate and learn how to help your horse, plus put a foundation on them, an excellent riding foundation. Thank you. May you always be one with your horse, and I look forward to hearing from you in the comments.